Oh, good afternoon and happy Saturday to you. Dr. Preston Ray Winfrey here. And what a joy and what a delight it is for me to have this opportunity once again to greet you. How in this world are you? Well, I hope and I pray that you're doing well. I'm hoping that you've had a great week so far. You've had a great afternoon, a great morning, and that you have a made up mind that is going to get better. Someone said it gets greater later, and indeed it does. And so we're looking forward to a great afternoon with you. I have had a very eventful week. It's been a great one, and I am so bubbly about it. I'm in my right mind, have a reasonable portion of health and strength. And you know, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for that. I hope that you are doing well and that you have enough challenges to keep you honest, right? And that enough is going on in your world that remind you to say your prayers, right? You don't ever want to neglect your prayer. Someone said, little prayer, you have little power. No prayer, no power. Lots of prayer, lots of power. But I'm going to even add, even if you have rusty prayer, that's better than no prayer, because no prayer, you don't have any power. So you always want to make certain that you have some power. How's your family doing? I hope that they're doing well. And wherever you're kind enough to tune us in, I'm just all over the place, but I'm happy that you have chosen to spend these few moments with me as we give our Saturday afternoon inspiration. I want to talk from the subject today. I want to ask this question: are you in your lane? Are you in your lane? Um, that's so great of a question, because in this life there are lanes. We don't always say lanes. We may sometimes refer to them as rules, regulations, things that govern us, powers that be. They set some things in place and say, this is how you are supposed to function. This is how you're supposed to operate. When you buy something, the manufacturer have on there, this is what the manufacturer suggests you do. This is how you should handle this particular item. This is how this machine operates. And of course, instructions are there for a reason. They help us to navigate smoothly. It helps us to get the job done with precision. And at the end of the day, it gives us a great feeling knowing that, hey, I did what I needed to do and it's all good. Well, in this life, um, we have rules and we have lanes, and those lanes are designated. It's an explicit or it's an understood regulation, right? When we start talking about rules and lanes, but the purpose for them is to govern one's conduct within a particular activity. Now, it doesn't matter what that activity is. There is some sort of government that is set up that says this is how you ought to do it in order to make it work, in order to get the right resolve. This is what you need to do. Dishwashing liquid, for example, they will suggest to you how much you should use. When you're washing clothes, they suggest to you the portion of detergent you should use. Years ago, many years ago, when I was much younger, I can recall thinking, well, the more soap powder, that's what we're using then, I'll put in here, the cleaner my clothes would be. Well, only to discover there were lots of suds, and even when it came time for the rinse cycle, I still had suds. And of course, I said, well, my clothes going to be clean. And of course, took them out, dried them, and wore them. And of course, I was itching for a long time because of the soap. Well, there are other activities. Driving, you know, bowling. We go bowling. You know, a group of us from the church goes bowling on Thursdays. Nice activity. It's a fun time for us. And we laugh at ourselves. We laugh at each other. No one is taking it so serious that we're going to have a stroke or heart attack over it, but it's just a great time. Even those who have come by to visit with us and did not bowl, but just the camaraderie that they experience just being in the place with us. Working. There are lanes, right? There are lanes. You have your desk and you have your assigned work to do. I can recall when I was in the marketplace and working, I had I worked in the assigned risk unit, and I had things that I needed to do. And there were some other jobs that I saw, pardon me, that I thought, hey, I could do those jobs too, but those weren't my jobs. I had an assigned work, which meant they had given me a lane, and as long as I functioned within the parameters of that lane, we were good. But if I wandered outside of that and tried to do someone else's job, well, that meant several things. One, my job would be left undone, or secondly, my work would have been shabby, and thirdly, whoever's job I was attempting to do would have been upset with me because I was doing their job. So knowing your lane is important. Knowing, you go back and you read in the days, the Bible days, during the days of the judges, you read something that says every man did what was right in his own eyes, right? And, we sometimes will entertain that, well, hey, I can do this, I can say this, I just feel I have the authority. Well, you can have the power and you can have the ability to say and do a lot of things. But if what you are doing and saying is not in your lane, then you are trespassing, and you might be, without knowing it, you may be creating a problem for yourself and for others. So knowing your lane is important. Is this mine to do? Is this mine to say? Is this mine to take? Is this mine to move? So many times we say, well, I think, well, the way I see it, in my own mind's eye, it should be, but if that's not your lane or your call, then you're going to end up getting bit by it. And how many times have we gotten bitten because we were not in our right lane? Well, what happens in driving on the expressway many times and up on the street? Accidents take place. Sometimes a person can get swiped by another vehicle because they are not in their lane. And sometimes you can become distracted. I know many times people have laid on their horns because I was distracted. Maybe my mind was on something else. Not maybe, my mind was on something else. I was not paying attention to my lane. And I'm just inching over and over, and all of a sudden someone lays on that horn. And sometimes, um, when I get back in my lane, they'll go ahead and get past me and say, drift once I pass you. Don't drift in front of me. Sometimes they weren't so kind. They would say something, and fortunately for me, um, my windows were up, so I could not hear what they were saying. They were probably saying, "Oh, God bless you, sir. You gracious man of God. I hope I didn't spook you." That's probably what they were saying. And other times they drove past and wouldn't give me a hand, but they would give me a finger. I'm not sure I know what that meant, but at any rate, it's because I was not in my lane. And for people to function properly, it's important for them to stay in their lane. And so let me just ask you again, are you in your lane? You do have an assigned lane. And when you're not in your lane, then that's when fights break out. That's when separation takes place. That's when some of the greatest misunderstandings come to the surface, when people are not in their lane. Staying in your right lane is going to be beneficial. Sometimes your lane may not seem to be that attractive, but it's your lane. And so there's three things that I would say as it relates to these lanes. The first thing is get to know your lane. Know your lane. Don't surmise. Don't say, I think that's my lane. I think I should be. No. Know your lane. That's the first thing. That is so important, right? You have to know your lane. You can't be up in the clouds talking about, I just believe that there's a lane. No, there is a lane. There's a designated lane for you. And so, know your lane. Know your lane. The second thing is get in your lane. Get in your lane. Again, there's really no difference between the lanes. And maybe that's why many people feel as though I can just be in whatever lane I want. But even when you're driving, you notice they have markers down on the road that will let you know this is a designated lane. And years ago, the left lane was usually the fast lane. The middle lane was for those who were, kind of mediocre, and the right lane was the slow lane. Well, nowadays, it's every lane. It's like every man goes for himself. And times, even when I think that I'm speeding, someone gets behind me and they land on their horn or they flash their lights, and I look at the odometer, look at how fast I'm going. I'm saying, well, gosh, I'm already over the speed limit. And so I either will sometimes just kind of maintain my speed. Sometimes I have been known to just take my foot off the accelerator and let them go around. And then, depending on the space I have, sometimes I'll just move over and let them go where they're going. But get in your lane. That's the second thing. Get in your lane and function in your lane. So again, if you're in the fast lane, then drive fast. That's what you do over there. Don't get in the fast lane and be obstinate. Well, I'm just going to take my time. No, that's the wrong attitude. And that will kind of bring on some road rage. So you can avoid some of that road rage, some of the language rage, some of those things that people do and say. So get in your lane. First thing, remember, let's go back over it. Know your lane. Second thing, get in your lane. third thing is stay in your lane. You know, it's your lane. Function in that lane. You're going to do well. I can recall one week we were bowling, and one of the persons who was in the group, it was their time to bowl, but they were about to bowl in the wrong lane. And in my own comedic way, I said, "Hey, get in your lane," and we all fell out and laughed. Uh, and they're like, "Oops, that's right." Yeah, see where your name is up there on the board? That's your lane. Get in that lane. And then when your name comes over here, then you can come back and get in this lane. And so we had fun with it. But how much of the serious part of life takes place when people are not in their right lane? So the lanes, remember, let's recap now. There are rules and regulations. They say this is how you're to function. This is what you should do. The manufacturers say for best results, do it this way. Even with cooking, I was taught, I learned rather, watching one of the cook shows years ago, says when you're scrambling an egg, say don't have your skillet or your pan so high with heat that when you put the egg in there, the egg is just trembling like it's going into convulsion. It's actually going into convulsion. But it should be at a level, a heating level, so that when you put your egg in there, it doesn't overcook and it's not cooking so fast. So, how are you doing? Are you good about being in your lane? Do you know your lane? Do you get in your lane and function in your lane? Do you stay in your lane? Do you have that discipline? It takes discipline to stay in your lane, you know. And just think, if we would all stay in our lanes and do what we are supposed to do, things have a way of working out just fine, right? There's a passage over in the New Testament that Paul talks about, Romans 8:28 says that we know that all things work together for good, them who love the Lord, those who are the called according to his purpose. There's a purpose for your life. You know that, right? God, he doesn't have you here by mistake. He's not just buying time with you here. There's something he wants you to do. And part of what he wants you to do is to know your lane, to get in your lane, and to stay in your lane. Function within your lane. Don't become distracted by what seemingly is not working out. Don't become distracted by people who are failing to do what they are supposed to do. The question is, are you doing what you're supposed to do? All things do work, but sometimes we can bring on extra stress and undue burdens and hardships, worrying about the next fella. A few disciples came one day to the Lord and said, "Hey, so and so isn't following you." He said, "What's that to you? Are you following?" He said, "If you're following, then we're good." Don't worry about the next fella. You know, don't worry about who has more popularity than you. Don't worry about who has more money than you. Don't worry about who drives a larger car than you. Don't worry about whose home is larger than yours. Don't worry about who they are married to. Don't worry, don't stress out about things that you have no say-so over. Operate within your lane. Now, to operate in your lane does not mean that you are oblivious to what goes on in other lanes. Sometimes it's helpful to know what goes on in other lanes, but be disciplined. At the end of the day, be disciplined to remain in your lane and know that in my lane, I'm going to get the great result that is needed because I am functioning and I'm operating in my lane. Finally, to do so, you're going to find contentment. Contentment says, hey, it's all good. And you want to reach a point in your life, right? You want to reach that point every day where you can say, it's good. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't trip out when others don't want to cooperate and do what they're supposed to do. If they're not in their lane, you maintain your discipline. Remain in your lane and know that all things do work together for the good. How so? Well, my Lord and your Lord, the one who died on the cross, died so that we could function in our lane. But had death been the end of it, then we can go hog wild and just go in everyone's lane. But death couldn't even keep him. He remained in his lane until Sunday morning. And Sunday morning came, he got up with all power in his hands, right? Yes, he did. And he got in his lane. He went back to heaven. And one day, he's going to come back. And he's coming back for those who's in their lane. Are you in your lane today? If you have somehow gotten out of your lane, why don't you get back in your lane? And make up in your mind that, you know what? I can do this. Reach a point in your life where you can stand to leave those things that were once distracting you alone. And you will be amazed how much simpler your life and how uncomplicated your life will be. Those who are speeding, driving like maniacs, in and out of everybody's lane, give them space to do. There's something waiting on them. Hopefully it's not a fatal accident, but many times it has been a terrible and sometimes a fatal accident. Sometimes after all their zigzagging, there's a little cop on the side waiting on someone just like that. And they just pulled them over and gave them a citation. Don't you get a citation because you're tempted to just go from lane to lane. Know your lane. Get in your lane. Stay in your lane. And next time that question is raised, are you in your lane? You will be able to answer in the affirmative. Yes, I am in my lane. Listen, I love you. God loves you. Thank you so much for joining me. And I pray that you'll have a good rest of today. Pray that you have a great day on tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be in worship. We do have a baptism on tomorrow. And we have an outing. So we just in for a great, great, wonderful time. And if you can join us tomorrow at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, love to have you to join in with us. Okay, in the meantime, this is Dr. Winfrey saying, I love you. And I'm so thankful that you joined me on today. Have a good rest of this day. And may the peace of God that surpasses all understanding be with you. Take care.